Hi, this is Troy Davison, creator of PHRETS. So where do we start? We've already installed PHRETS using Composer, and Composer has automatically managed and downloaded all of our dependencies for us. But where do we go from here? So with a blank download.php file, the first step that we need to do in order to get our script ready to go is to require the PHRETS library and the dependencies using the autoloader that Composer's created for us. So the first step is to require that autoloader. And now that autoloader is included within our script, we automatically have access to all the classes that we need in order to get the script up and going. So with the PHRETS library, the first class that we interact with is the configuration. This allows us to set up our connection information, set some options, and basically tell the RETS library where it needs to connect to and what server it needs to interact with. So the first step is to create a new instance of that class, and then we can start setting some options on this. So for example, we can set the login URL. We can set the username and password for our credentials. And those three things make up the basic authentication requirements of RETS in general. However, you might have been given access to a RETS server that requires a few additional pieces of information. For example, when your credentials were created, they could limit you to using only a particular piece of software, or what's generally referred to as a user agent. So you may need to specify that particular user agent when you connect. In addition to the user agent, you might have also been given a user agent password. And the combination of your normal credentials and the user agent credentials is something that's covered in a different video, but you'll need to provide those here. In addition to the normal credentials and the user agent information, you can also specify the RETS version to use. This might be dictated by the version supported by the RETS server, or may have also been included in the access information that you're originally given. So here we've specified that we want to connect using RETS version 1.7.2. PHRETS is also compliant with 1.5 and 1.8, so you can include either of those as well. However, whether or not it will actually work is based on how compliant the RETS server is that you're connecting to. In addition to these connection configuration options, we can also set some other options that control the behavior of the PHRETS library as it's interacting with the server. For example, in legacy versions of PHP, there's a concept of PHP safe mode, which will control or limit the number of capabilities that a PHP script is allowed to execute and is allowed to do. And one of those deals with a capability within curl where it will automatically follow redirects. So if you're running into that, you do have the option to come in and disable that if you're interested. In addition to disabling the following of redirects, you may run into instances where a RETS server requires that you use HTTP post methods instead of GET, or for example, you might be making big requests that would otherwise exceed the maximum allowed characters on a GET request. So if you're interested in all the interactions of this library with the server happening using post requests instead of GET, you can specify that here as well. And with our configuration set up, we are ready to get connected. So once you have the configuration set and the options placed, we need to start a session. And we start the session by creating a new session object. With that session object, we have to pass in the configuration that we have basically set up and bootstrapped, so that the session and all the future interactions with that RETS server can follow the different options and parameters that we've given it. Once the session is set up, we're ready to make our first request. So here we're going to issue our initial login request to the RETS server, and we're going to get a response back. To run the script and see what it's doing, we will simply call download.php. So the successful connection here is basically indicated by the lack of any exceptions being thrown. We can do some additional testing by doing a var dump of the login that came back. The object that comes back from a successful login is a bulletin object, and that bulletin allows us to retrieve additional information back. For example, if there are messages or other important announcements that have been made available on the RETS server for you to retrieve. The body of this will include that text that you can then review and use however you deem appropriate for your application. But with this, we've basically demonstrated a live connection to a RETS server that has successfully authenticated, and now you are ready to make any additional requests to pull records or to pull objects that's appropriate for your particular application. So that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully this was helpful. If you have any comments or suggestions on future videos or tutorials that should be covered, please leave those in the comments below.